Great. So thank you so much for agreeing to this quick interview to talk about your high quality approach to instruction in mathematics. So just before you introduce yourself and your grade levels that you teach and subject areas, math, I was wondering a little bit about how planning for remote instruction, what kinds of things did you prioritize or what was really important for you?
I think um, the foundation, I guess, for remote learning was making sure students knew how to use the applications that we were using in math and the other subjects. So, for example, how to use Google Classroom, um, how to use, well, we used Khan Academy for math, how to use iReady, which was like something I used for formative assessments, and just other applications, even extensions in Google Meet, like for example, nod reactions and stuff like that. So like basic, I guess, essentials for remote learning. And it wasn't easy in the beginning because everything was fairly new for everyone. Yeah, some students knew how to log into Khan Academy, but they weren't that accustomed to like Google Classroom and all these new remote learning applications that we had to essentially break it down for the students and make it accessible. But yeah.
Nice. Yeah, so important to have those common agreements and
Yeah,
understandings, right? Makes it go a lot easier.
of
You know,
course.
you were so so versed, and what really came across as being clear were the connections between synchronous and asynchronous learning. So, in other words, it wasn't separate. It was really connected. What you did in your synchronous,
Yeah.
intentional and synchronous time was really connected to the asynchronous. And we were wondering about what kind of planning is involved in that, and did you have any collaboration that you were doing in that plan?
Yeah, with the synchronous and the asynchronous, I think what helped me the most was our math department in our school, the sixth grade math department. We outlined what well, we started in March, so the last 3 months would look like. And at the time, everyone was at a different unit. Like maybe someone was on unit 7 and unit 5, and I was on unit 6 when we started remote learning. And doing that pacing for those 3 months was really essential because then I knew what to do not only when I had my office hours, but also like what the students needed in terms of those who couldn't make it to the office hours, those who had like family commitments and stuff like that. So I think the pacing calendar really helped me, which was the most essential part. And just planning with the other teachers, seeing what worked for them at the time, because some of them were ahead of me. And I'm like, okay, so maybe you should cut this short, do this, do that. So like that saved me a lot of time.
Mhm.
And I did have a co-teacher, but she was new. She didn't know much math, like instruction.
Mhm.
So I had to like really step up and try to make sure that whatever pacing we were doing and whatever I had in mind made it accessible for her because she was she was new. She really didn't know what to do, and obviously no one knew what to do for remote learning.
Mhm.
So that was another thing. I think the pacing really helped. I just sat down for like 2 days and like really stretched it out. And I gave myself some days where I'm like, maybe the students won't get this topic in X amount of days, so I'll have a review session right here. I was very flexible. I think also being flexible with your schedule really helped
Mhm.
because there were some days where I remember the students like were not going to be on remotely, so I had to like take that into consideration and then switch my pacing for the following because I was like a day behind, quote unquote,
Mhm.
or 2 days behind. So yeah.
Wow, so fascinating. I'm really thinking about all the different levels that you have there. So you're collaborating with colleagues, obviously not in person.
Oh
So
yeah.
you like all the emails that must be going back and forth, the different ways to leverage communication through
Yeah,
technology.
we would meet every Monday, so we would talk about like our pacing, what's going on in the classroom, any ideas. what should we do next, stuff like that. So that, and it's in the beginning of the week, so it's really essential because then it sets you up for the rest of the
Absolutely. And I'm assuming some adjustment happens there too, like things that have to be
yeah.
accelerated and things that have to be taken away or taken
Yeah,
care
I had to like take got a lot of things out that I didn't want to, but I knew I didn't have time for it. So I had to do what I thought was best at the time. It might not have been the right decision, I don't know, but those are the decisions you make
of.
when you're doing remote
Hmm.
because, you know, tomorrow you only know for today, tomorrow's uncertain.
That's true.
So you have to do what you have to do in that moment.
Hmm.
And yeah, it takes a lot. It was a lot of collaboration though, which I really appreciated because you can't do it by yourself.
No, I really appreciate you saying that. We've been really advocating for more time and more support for teacher collaboration, that needs to be administration's first priority because
Yeah, yeah, of
a
course.
lot of time goes into this, in not only the planning and the instruction, but that leads to my next question, which is about assessment and really like implementing those formative assessment practices, utilizing the platforms and also your teacher team. Can you talk a
Yeah,
little bit about that?
yeah, of course. I was. I'm just gonna wait for the announcement. Sorry. Um, I was for this. I guess for remote learning, I really looked heavily on data, whether it was not just like student work, but also like we did something every Friday. I would give them math journal reflections.
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember that.
I do.
Um, but in terms of like the formative assessments, I would use Khan Academy, iReady, and if I gave them like a Google Doc, I would just like a review sheet or something of that nature. Then I would look it over closely and see any patterns among the students. Like, okay, I see so and so is doing it this way, or like you know some misconceptions along the way, and then addressing those misconceptions that day, or I write a comment to them or something like that, or like if they come during our Google Meet, I would address it.
Mhm.
I was I relied heavily on data. I think the journals uh, were a big part of like what I would do the next week.
Mhm.
Students were able to write about math and about their feelings. And if I felt like I was giving them too much work, then I would like take some things off or not count some stuff, even though the kids didn't know, because
Mhm.
I didn't want them
Right.
to like, oh, I can like just slack off and do nothing.
Totally.
And yeah, the journals really help with the misconceptions. I think a lot of students did the problem of the day. I had a problem of the day, or problem of the week, sorry, of the
Mhm.
day. And if I saw a student like did something like that was concerning, I'm like, okay, like maybe they're not understanding. Then I would address it in that moment, or I would have like a Google Meet with them because I know that students they need that interaction, the socialization, and so yeah, that's what I did. I didn't really give them tests. I was very like, how do I know tests are important, like the data is very important, but at that time it was overwhelming.
Mhm.
So some of my colleagues did give them like, you know, end of unit tests or like quizzes, and I did something similar, but I did it where it felt less overwhelming, like less questions,
Mhm.
like things that I knew that if they knew, then I would be comfortable saying like we can move on.
Mhm.
And it was something that was difficult for me because I know that that data is important, but it's just like you pick and choose, I guess. You always pick and choose. And in the moment, I feel like I can't give them exams if I'm giving them 3 lessons a week and doing I ready. It's just too much. And I the thing is, like, we can't only think about math itself. We got to think about the other subjects because they're getting a lot of work from others teachers.
Hmm.
and I always took that into consideration. So like I would try to give them less work, even though like I would also push them, in a sense. And they always had the journal reflections. That was the most important thing for me.
Yeah, it was so authentic. You really got to hear um, what they were thinking, right? And
Yeah.
I think what it also provided for students was a metacognitive opportunity to think about their own process in mathematics.
Yeah.
And I think what you also did really well that may or may not be something you advocate for going forward, but you really took the most essential components and focused on those. And then if students needed scaffolding in the moment, you were able to do that through multiple avenues. So everything you had created through Edpuzzle, your Edpuzzles were related to what was happening in Khan Academy. It wasn't, separate or
Yeah.
random. It was like very intentional, right? And
Yeah.
so I think that really fit together well and allowed for some of that math journaling to really surface students' own thinking.
I can talk about that if you want,
Yeah.
about like that process. I looked heavily on Khan Academy first
Hmm.
and see how it related to illustrative mathematics. And then when I was doing my videos, I would do questions that were similar to Khan. So they would see like, oh, this is similar to this. And I would, in Ed Puzzle videos, I would always ask them questions and I always have them write notes as like we would do in the classroom, like, oh, this is very important. You should write this down or underline it. Or what does this word mean?
Hmm.
Here's an example of how it's used. In the classroom, I would use the Freyer model, which is like the word definition, an example of the word, and also the misconception. And I would go over the misconceptions on the Ed puzzle too,
Yeah.
just in case, because I knew students would like fall for like silly tricks that some questions may ask.
Hmm.
Um, it was I try to make it all connected. It was a lot of work.
I wondered about that and
It was
if it, yeah,
it was
did it get any
very
easier? Like it must have been really hard at first, but
the
I'm
first
wondering.
2 weeks it was difficult. I felt like very tired
Yeah.
because um, I just the reason why I did the Ed puzzle videos, and here I go again with the data,
Uh-huh.
it's the math journal reflections. They kept telling me, "Hey, Miss Aguilar, like I'm not understanding the Khan Academy videos."
Hmm.
And what I learned, in essence, is that students need to hear a familiar voice. Like they were so used to my voice or Miss Cookies or the other
Hmm.
teacher, and when they heard our voice, it was much more soothing, and they're more likely to understand or like, oh hey, Miss Aguilar's trying to be funny. I know, like he was like that in the classroom, like it was
Yeah.
something that I didn't think about in the moment. I'm like, oh snap, that puzzle, and I saw like everyone's grades went up or like much better.
Hmm.
But it was I keep saying the math. I'm gonna use that forever. Like the math journal reflections are
Yeah.
the most essential thing to my
Hmm.
teaching, my pedagogy as a teacher is like that's key for me.
Yes.
And yeah, just that helped me with that puzzle videos. It got easier. Um, I knew what I wanted to show them essentially and what I wanted them to learn. And I always wanted them to ask questions, like, how is this related to what I'm doing in my life? I was trying to make it relatable. I think that's the most important thing. There was one piece where I did like Mario Kart, and a lot of kids like Mario Kart for some reason, and just try to make it as relatable as possible, so that it's like an opening. Like once they're in, it's much easier for them to keep going than to get out. So
Absolutely. And that, I mean, really what you're talking about is that social and emotional connection too,
yeah,
where there's that feeling of safety in such an unsafe perhaps situation or uncertain situation, like being able to make those connections it's all connected.
yeah, yeah,
So I
of
think
course.
that really came across.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
when students find math in their lives, it's easier, even though it's like it might be hard to conceptually understand the math, they're more willing to
Mhm.
be resilient in the moment. And
Mhm. Mhm.
and I have a lot of students that come in and say, I don't like math, or have mathematical trauma from years prior, but they come into the classroom, they're gonna make mistakes. I'm gonna make mistakes. Of course,
Mhm.
we have donut points when the teachers make mistakes. So like
Right.
we're all learning. Like
Right.
essentially, I'm learning from them, and they're
Absolutely.
learning from me.
Yes.
So
You certainly drove home the sense, you and your team, the sense of community, that it's a learning
yeah,
community, and that's such an essential part of any whole group experience. And it makes asking for help a lot easier too. I found that many of the students in your class also felt very comfortable asking for help, whether it
yeah,
was through that journal or they just hit you up like, I don't get it. So I think that's a testament to
yeah.
all of those pieces fitting together.
And like
um,
the thing that I want to say is like I personally I was not the 6-1S teacher. I was six
right.
one I and L, but the
Right.
students like were so comfortable, like they knew like, hey, it's Mr. Aguilar, he's in math and he's in the videos. So like even
Yeah.
though technically they weren't my students, I always like try to be that open with them because
Hmm.
they're gonna have questions. When I was their age, I was like, what is that? But I didn't feel comfortable
Yep.
asking my teachers.
Hmm.
So like
Hmm.
6-1S students will always like email me, and I'm like, let's set up a meeting, let's do this, and be very flexible. So that's one of the things that a lot of
Hmm.
students didn't know. I wasn't their teacher
It's true.
technically,
It's so
but
true. Yeah. Yeah.
it
And
was
how amazing is that, right? Another way you stepped up this year into to like the beyond,
yeah,
Yeah,
that was
really,
cool.
really strong work, very strong work. Is there any advice you have for teachers out there who are attempting to do either fully remote or even a blended situation, depending on how things roll?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that I learned that I always it's been my teaching pedagogy, like philosophy, is like developing relationships first.
Yeah.
Like forget the content, like do the work, the underground work. Like if
Mhm.
you know your students, if you know what their interests are, their triggers, their fears, their goals, you can use all that information to
Mhm.
push them.
Yeah.
And whatever you present to them, like math content, ELA content, they're more willing to do it because you're there and because you care. And I think that's the best thing you can do at the beginning. Just develop those like show them who you are, not just in the classroom, outside the classroom. Like be yourself. I think that's the most important. I was always myself. I was silly. I was making jokes. They're like, you're not funny, and I kept going. It's just something that you have to be genuine about. You can't fake it. Like
Yeah.
they'll kids know, like they know if you're faking it. And
Hmm.
I think that's the most important thing. Like the rest will come. Like
Nice.
so,
Great. I think it probably extends to your colleagues too, right? Building those relationships so those awkward, intense planning sessions can go where they
yeah,
need to
yeah,
go. Hmm. Yeah.
yeah. I think yeah, I've always been one. I've always said it. Like any new teacher that I came in contact with, that's my thing. Like you have to build those relationships. Like,
Hmm.
it has to be positive. There's gonna be days where you both like wanna, you know, just fight each other and just like scream. But
Hmm.
that's human nature when you have two people that care about, each other and stuff.
Hmm. Very true. Wow. Well, you are amazing as usual, and I really appreciate this time to chat. And I just think the world of you and your team, and really appreciate the leadership that you all have shown in the last half of last year, and then what you're doing now to prepare for this year. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, bro. Yeah, we're trying to do
Yeah.
our best with what we're given.